It's been about a month, and there's a reason for that, because it's time for another monthly discussion with Sam. Sam?
Hi, thank you for having me again.
Hey, it's, if anything's, if anything, we have more continuity than WWE does, so at least we have something going for us. Well, do we really? Because we don't usually do it on the same day every month. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sounded good, I'm sticking to it. I mean, it's not like anybody's going to correct me. Well, I mean, enough has happened in the last month to warrant at least some discussion, namely All Elite Wrestling having their first show, and a certain show in Saudi Arabia also happening in the last month, since we last talked. I know, or I'm sure you probably didn't see Double or Nothing, but I'm sure you probably heard about Double or Nothing by now. Is that fair?
Yes.
Yeah. Are you surprised that Jon Moxley ended up in AEW?
No, I think that was a given. I think we all pretty much saw that coming.
Were you happy he debuted the way he did? Or do you think they could have done it a different way?
No, I didn't have a problem with it.
Now something that I noticed, and I've noticed with his promos that I've seen, he seems to be very, a lot more relaxed, and a lot more, like, I don't want to say energized, but maybe energized is the right word, than he was when he was in WWE. That if he had those characteristics when he was in WWE, maybe he would have gotten over more, like as a heel. But do you think that maybe his change in personality has to do with him leaving WWE? Like maybe that gives an indication on how bad it was for him there?
Yeah, I think you could see towards the end how, frustrated he was. So now he gets to do what he wants to do, and not be stuck in that creative bubble.
Yeah. Well, as far as the least bit of controversy about him being barred from working New Japan shows in the States, and people blaming that on All Elite Wrestling, can you what's your opinion on that?
On him
not being able to work New Japan shows in the US.
Oh, I mean, I don't see why he shouldn't. Why he shouldn't be allowed to.
I mean, the only way I can understand it is if it was a booking problem. If it was a booking problem, then I can understand. Where he had an all elite show the same day or the same weekend in a different state. That's the only way I can sort of understand it, which I actually could probably, because I know the next All Elite show after Fyter Fest at the end of June is the second week of July, like right after the Fyter Fest show. So that could be why he it is possible, because I'm looking at the New Japan show now that it says it's the weekend of July 6th. So it is possible that that's the reason why he can't work the New Japan show, because I think it is a booking issue with All Elite Wrestling, and it sounds better than him having an exclusive deal with AEW to work in the United States, which apparently that's what Meltzer said. That he can't work for any other company in the U.S., but he can work for other companies in Japan.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, if it's a scheduling conflict, it's one thing.
Actually, I take that back. It isn't a scheduling conflict because their show's the following weekend. So it probably is what Meltzer said. It's an exclusive contract. It's an exclusivity issue.
Oh, well, I mean, I think that's kind of stupid, but I guess.
Well, and to also make a case for AEW, Moxley was never advertised for the Dallas shows to begin with. So the fact that he's not able to compete on the Dallas shows, I mean, it's like, you know, a double-edged sword, like, you know, he was never advertised, but he can't compete anyway, so it's like, you know, I mean, I understand because it's, you know, a part of the G1 Climax, but, you know, I don't know. I don't know who. I really don't have a pony in the race, so I don't really care either way. I mean, I do understand what people mean as like, oh, we're jumping all over WWE for not letting people compete in other places, but we're not jumping over AEW. But when you think about it, the Street Profits in NXT, they're Evolve Tag Team Champions. So, can you really jump all over WWE for not letting people compete elsewhere? You know, I can understand them not letting main roster people compete, but developmental, they do. They have. I mean, Chris Hero's done it how many times? With UK companies and companies elsewhere, and, you know, Pete Dunne did it, and other people did it, but, you know, it's also the fact that, you know, I guess I can just understand both sides of it, is what I'm saying, as far as Moxley's concerned.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. But going back, I know, or I can assume, that from our previous conversation about the Saudi Arabia show last year and the Australia show last year, or all the super shows last year, Australia and the 2 Saudi Arabia shows, neither one of us really got the point of making such a big deal of a glorified house show. Has your opinion on that changed after Super Showdown 2 weeks ago, or almost 2 weeks ago? Or is your opinion on the show the same as it was last year?
No, it's still the same. I think I honestly haven't watched wrestling in months because the whole thing, both shows are pointless now to me. There's no this stupid wild card rule thing. Just nothing that they're doing makes any sense.
Well, I don't disagree, and, you know, that's when, you know, you say, well, you know, I'm still a fan, but, you know, there's life happening, and, you know, life gets in the way sometimes of watching it, but it's also the fact that they're not making it hard to not watch. Like, they're not making you feel like you're missing something when you don't watch. And I feel like that's a problem. You know, because you're not even hearing about it online of, oh, today was a good show, you know, you missed it. I mean, yeah, maybe 1 or 2 matches, like, you know, Ricochet and Samoa Joe, or, you know, whatever the case may be, but when you're talking about 1 or 2 matches on a 3-hour show, that's like, you know, sitting through a pay-per-view to watch 1 match. You know, it's kind of like you're sitting there for 3 hours or 4 hours to watch 1 match. Why not just go back and watch the highlights of it, or watch it when somebody puts it online? Why waste the time and watch a 3-hour show if you're just waiting for one match? You know, I mean, that's the problem with WWE, that it usually is, where people are just waiting for one match and then tune out after the show, or as the show progresses. I mean, I agree. My opinion of the Super Showdown is still the same thing, and I mean, I don't have a problem with the fact that they had Goldberg and The Undertaker fight each other for the first time at the Super Showdown. I prefer it that way. I prefer it that way because, I don't know about you, but I'm over seeing, like, it's not an insult to either one of the guys. Both of them are like icons in wrestling, but it's just the fact that unless they're putting over somebody and retiring, I think it's time for them to hang up the boots and let it go.
Oh no, I feel the same.
I mean, I thought that way about Taker after his match with Roman Reigns a few years ago at WrestleMania, but Goldberg, he kind of showed he can't really work anymore. You know, not an insult to him, but it's just the fact that they never paced him because he never had the skills to back it up, so he could never work a long match. You know, and I think that some people would say that was one of the problems with their match at the Super Showdown, that it went too long. But either way, it was a match, it happened. Was it good? No. If I was Taker, I'd probably maybe look to have one better match to rid people's minds from the stinker or the unfortunate match that was their match in Saudi Arabia. It wasn't either one of their faults. It was just an unfortunate match. You know, you probably guessed that the heat in Saudi Arabia may have played a part, or the fact that they're both in their 50s and have never worked together. And, they can't, you're not as quick on your feet as you get older, so maybe Taker, what he was able to do back then working with other giants, that he isn't able to do anymore because he's too old. Or he's older than he was when he did it, with guys like Giant Gonzalez and people like that. But also, I would say that points out why Taker can't work with Braun. Because I don't think Braun would be able to carry Taker. I think the best thing for Taker would be to work with somebody smaller than him, like a Finn Balor or somebody like that, to where it would be easier for Taker to move around. But that's just my opinion. And it's not... Well, and it's not because of, I like Finn or anything like that. It's just because Finn's the perfect size to work with Taker.
No, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. Or Seth, or, Daniel, or Kofi, or somebody like that. One thing that I don't think we talked about was the fact that continuously it seems like John Cena is referencing the fact that he's retired. That him saying, WWE doesn't need me anymore. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think that it's more along the lines that maybe Cena just doesn't want to stay on just wants to be able to do his own thing now? Because he's, I don't want to say an established movie star, but more established than, say, Steve Austin was when Steve moved to Hollywood. Or, other people who have made the jump from wrestling to Hollywood, that Cena's more of... he needs to focus more on establishing a credibility in Hollywood, and maybe that's why he doesn't want to do wrestling anymore.
I think it's obvious he's pretty much done. WWE doesn't really need him anymore. I think he's done all he can, and it's time for him to move on.
Well, would you agree that maybe WWE doesn't need him anymore if he's only going to come and do one-off appearances and then disappear? Or do you think that if he was more like Brock, where he would come, stay for like 3 months and then disappear, and then come back for 6 months and then disappear, do you think that they would still need him if he was around more, or do you think it's better for both if they just move on?
No, I think it's time for him to move on. Honestly, I don't think they've needed John Cena for a long time.
Do you think that they'd be in a better position if they maybe used Cena better to establish the new talent when he did leave? Or do you think it would be impossible to have anticipated him leaving when he did?
No, I mean, I guess it wouldn't hurt if he, was used to put somebody over.
Now, based on his previous feuds, Rusev, Bray, his short thing with Elias, the rumored storyline with Lars Sullivan that was supposed to happen but never did, his thing with Taker last year. Who do you think, or who would you have put him over? Would you have revisited, the stuff with Finn Balor from earlier in the year, and had Finn get a victory over Cena? Go.
Somebody from NXT, like Velveteen Dream. Not that he needs to be put over, but I think, if anything, that's the young up and coming star. That's that would make the most sense.
Now, do you think that, considering Velveteen Dream is 22, 23, it would be too soon to give him such a big victory over Cena? Or do you think that he's the type of guy that wouldn't get a big ego, or it doesn't seem like he would, and he would just be like the perfect guy because of his age to build around?
No, yeah, I think he'd be the perfect guy because of his age and how over he already is in NXT.
I think that's fair, and I think I wish they could have done the Lars Sullivan angle with Lars and Cena. Not that I didn't like the Dr. Thugonomics Cena coming out at WrestleMania. I think that if Cena wasn't going to have a match, that was the best way to use him. But I think also giving Lars such a big win in his first WrestleMania, in his first match, and having it be at WrestleMania and against Cena, it would have established him as some sort of a big monster. But also you have to think, is it better that it didn't happen? Because what would they have done next? And WWE always has a problem with the follow-up. They don't have a problem with coming up with a good idea, they have a problem with what they do next. And I know this because I have the same problem. I think of a good idea, put it into effect, but what do I do next? It's okay if Lars beats Cena, but if he goes on and just loses to Seth Rollins, then what's the point? Then you just wasted him beating John Cena.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, and you're right, that's what they do, so it's probably best that didn't happen.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it's just the fact that, I don't know if, I heard Lars might be injured. I don't know if it was just a fan talking because, it was a fan. I didn't really look into it because, in my opinion, from what I remember from him in NXT, he is talented, but WWE doesn't have a good track record of recent success with the recent crop of NXT graduates. Yes, Nikki Cross seemingly finally found her footing with Alexa Bliss, but EC3, Heavy Machinery, and Lars are still like floundering in the main roster, and it's just a question of, okay, why bring anybody else up until you find a place for the people that you brought up back in January? You know, it's just like, you know, and I mean, that's what you keep hearing about Matt Riddle, that he's not coming up anytime soon. But, you know, based on recent booking of the people who have come up, I don't think I'd want him to come up. At least not yet.
Yeah, I think that's most people. Like, most of the people in NXT are better off in NXT.
Oh no, I agree completely. And I mean, it's unfortunate because NXT is supposed to be looked at as a developmental and not a stronger brand than WWE. But, you know, that just shows what, like, you know, the older people, the older wrestling personalities have said that wrestling is harder when you overcomplicate it. And if, you know, you just keep it as basic where it's, you know, this guy's bad, this guy's good, they have a problem, you know, don't overcomplicate it. You know, you can make them have characters and gimmicks like Velveteen Dream and, you know, other people, but you don't have to, you know, because, you know, having depth to the people's characters is also what makes people get cheered or booed, but trying to overcomplicate it and make it, you know, overly funny or overly this or overly that, it's a good way to turn people off. In my opinion. Now, I don't know if we talked about it the last time, but if we did, I'll talk about it again because I don't remember. 24/7 title. What's your opinion on it? Do you like it? Do you think it has anything, you know, do you think it could capture some of the following that the hardcore title did? Do you, you know, what is your take on the 24/7 title?
Truthfully, I think it's stupid and a big waste of time. I think it's just something, again, it's part of the reason I don't watch anymore, because I get, like, it's like comedy, and I understand that, but it's like, it's not entertaining to me. It's just, they don't pay attention to, you know, when's the last time, like, the women's tag team titles were defended, but you're gonna introduce another title. It doesn't have any meaning, like, anymore. Nothing they do has any meaning.
It was either when, no, I think Peyton and Billie Kay fought Asuka and Kairi Sane at a pay-per-view on a pre-show, but I don't know if it was for the title or not. That's a good question. I don't disagree with that, and I think I would agree with that more if R-Truth wasn't champion. Because R-Truth and Carmella are funny people. They are very entertaining, and I think that's the only reason why the title is somewhat working, in my opinion, because R-Truth has become a staple of programming because of that title. Other than that, I think, you know, people like EC3 or Bobby Roode should be doing a lot more than just going after the 24/7 title. I think WWE has enough fodder on their roster to fill in that division. To not have, like, you know, you have people like Zack Ryder or, you know, R-Truth, or, you know, people who aren't doing much. But, I mean, yeah, that's EC3 and Robert Roode, but how are you going to help either one of them if they're looked at as a joke in that division? Or you have, Apollo Crews or Titus O'Neil, people who aren't doing much. But it like, you can't have somebody like an EC3 in there if he's not going to be taken seriously, because it's going to hurt, make it harder to have him taken seriously if you want to do more with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's unfortunate because he is extremely talented, so is Bobby Roode. I do agree with the idea that I think at this point, though, in Bobby Roode's career, it's not an insult to him, but I think he's worked hard and just wants to make money now. That he doesn't care how he's being booked, just as long as he's making a good chunk of change. Which, there's nothing wrong with that, because he's worked his ass off for 20 years to get there. So, it makes sense, but, a guy like EC3, he's still young enough to where he has at least 10, 15 years left in his career.
Definitely.
I mean, and I know both of us don't mean to, basically tear down WWE and WWE, tear down and tear down and tear down. I mean, I will give them praise that I've liked from what I've seen and heard. I've liked the Baron Corbin, Seth Rollins stuff. And not just because I said that Baron Corbin should be challenging for the Universal title. I think that compared to the top feud on SmackDown, which, to my knowledge, it's not good. Like, I know it's ironic that two people who don't watch the programming anymore are talking about the programming that we don't watch. But it's hard to not think that, like, what the top storyline is on Raw. And that's a good thing, because you should be able to know what's going on without watching it. Or have an idea of what's going on without watching it to know if you want to watch it. But the fact that I don't know the top the top storyline on SmackDown, that's not good.
They could Dolph Ziggler and Kingston.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. And it's Shane and his push.
Oh, yeah. Living man's nepotism and...
I mean, I don't
ridiculous egos.
I don't mind that Dolph and Kofi are fighting for the title, because Dolph and Kofi have always had amazing chemistry together. But it's just the fact that, looking back at the last time Dolph was supposed to be taken as a serious competitor, when he fought Dean Ambrose, those two guys didn't really click. Like with Dolph and The Miz when they fought for the IC title, like, if they wanted to do it right, then Dolph should have kept the IC title for a while, after basically putting his career on the line and then winning the match and having an amazing match and blah 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 blah. But they made him drop the title the next month, because they don't care about the mid-card titles. And then, less than a year later, the brand split happens. He surprises everybody, wins the title. Wins the six-pack challenge, and it's more like they just wanted an easy fodder challenger for Ambrose before AJ Styles, as opposed to, oh, Dolph's deserving. Dolph is a credible opponent for Ambrose. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Kofi and Dolph's matches, and I've seen a lot of their matches from the past, and they haven't competed in a long time, so it'll be a fresh match. But is Dolph really on the level where he's a capable challenger for the WWE title anymore?
I would say no.
Exactly, and that's the problem. I understand if they're, like, grasping for straws and they don't know who they want to have challenge for the title, but I mean, if you really want to do it, then, I mean, I hate to say it, but switch the title off Kofi and put it on Roman. Because then you have the heels on the roster to go after Roman. You have McIntyre, you have Even with the wild card rule now, you could have people from Raw that aren't doing anything on Raw. You could have them go over to SmackDown and work against the champion in a feud. I mean, Samoa Joe could fight Roman Reigns for the WWE title. It's a bad idea because he's U.S. champion, but still, with the work that he did with Rey Mysterio, I mean, nobody's hotter than Samoa Joe right now. I mean, I know Andrade's taking some time off, but with the work that he did with Rey Mysterio, if you want to give somebody a chance that people would actually love because of what he did in NXT, Andrade's a perfect challenger for Kofi, in my opinion. I mean, and it's just Shane McMahon, he never lost to The Miz, he's now beaten Roman Reigns. What the heck is WWE doing? How is this going to help the ratings? That's a good question. I don't know. Unless they're really, really trying very hard to make sure that when Roman Reigns wins the title again, he's going to be cheered and not booed. Because it's possible, in my opinion, knowing WWE and how crazy they've been, Shane wins the title and loses it to Roman. Even though that didn't work when Triple H did it. 3 years ago.
Well, clearly WWE learned their lesson, so nothing would surprise me.
Well, speaking of not learning their lesson, there's something that we would have to talk about that is coming up this weekend, or from what I've heard it is this weekend, or coming up very soon. Stomping Grounds. The new WWE pay-per-view. Ticket sales for the event in the Tacoma Dome, not very good. It's to the point where WWE's giving away 2 tickets for $20. They're doing deals to try and sell out the arena, or sell out the arena where it's to the point of where it's not like it's half empty. Because they've tarped off a lot of the hard camera side and sides of the arena that aren't being sold. But I believe the Tacoma Dome is a decent-sized venue, and you'd notice if a lot of seats are tarped off. Like, what do you like? Is it the matches for the show? Is it just that people are just like tired of, like, the interest level isn't there for the show to have another show in this month, or what? Like, what do you think is the problem with why Stomping Ground is not selling? Or do you think it's just the fact that WWE announced it less than a month ago?
I think it's the same reason I don't watch it anymore. That people are, it's literally the same thing every week. Like, I don't even know what I don't know what the matches are, but there's a pay-per-view every other week, it feels like, and it's the same 3 matches.
Well, I know one of the matches on the show is Seth versus Baron Corbin for the title.
Yeah, nobody wants to see Baron Corbin.
I mean, is Corbin
in the main event of a match?
Is Corbin over? Yes, but is it the type of match that should be main eventing a pay-per-view?
No.
No, because I don't think people want to see Corbin possibly win. If anything, Corbin is just a easy heel defeat to Seth to give him a longer run as champion, and it's just the fact that that's why I think it would have been better off going with AJ as opposed to Baron now, but that's just me. Or maybe you establish a Daniel Bryan, Seth Rollins thing, and then Roman Reigns comes in because Roman's on Daniel's show, and then you have a tag team match at this pay-per-view with Roman and Seth against Daniel. Eric Rowan, but it's also possible that the company wants to keep Roman and Seth separate. That's why Roman's on SmackDown and Seth's on Raw. Oh, but what about the Royal Card rule? If they're not interacting with each other, then technically they're separate. You know, if they're not interacting with each other on camera, that's still keeping them separate. But still, I mean, you don't really want, like, your biggest star of the company being Roman Reigns and having him interact with the world champion to make the world champion seem like less of a star. You'd rather Seth be the guy on Raw and Roman be the guy on SmackDown. But that's just my opinion. Like, there was another... Basically, in my opinion, there's other options, other ways it could have gone with this event. In my opinion, not having Stomping Ground would have been a better idea, and just sticking with the fact that NXT had their pay-per-view this month and Super Showdown was this month, that would have been... That's more than enough as far as this is concerned, because they should also be focusing on SummerSlam right now, not setting up matches for a pay-per-view that nobody's going to do. And for once, saying that, it's not that far off. That it's a pay-per-view that not many people are going to. Would you agree that they should be paying more attention to SummerSlam as opposed to trying to rush in a pay-per-view?
Yes, definitely. They stop these pay-per-views and keep, the main pay-per-views.
Well, now, do you think that's something that Impact Wrestling did right when they did away with basically all their pay-per-views outside of Bound for Glory and Slammiversary? Or do you think that maybe they... I mean, yes, they do special events now, but the special events are more just like television specials, I'm pretty sure. They're not necessarily pay-per-views.
I mean, when I started watching... Sorry. There were pay-per-views, like, pay-per-views actually meant something.
Mm-hmm.
And now they don't. Like, literally, they're every 3 weeks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's where somebody said back in the day, I was like... I forget who said it, but they said, oh, you can't have 12 pay-per-views a year, you're going to kill the pay-per-view market. Well, what about the fact that WWE had, at some points, 16, at some points, 18, at some points, 20, because you have, the Super Showdown, that's sometimes, the Super Shows in Australia and Saudi Arabia that are classified as pay-per-views, and not just house shows or big events. And then you have NXT's pay-per-views, and then you have NXT UK's pay-per-views, and then you have WWE's pay-per-views. I think it would be justified to focus on, to reset like they used to, the Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, and Survivor Series, and then if you want to have another one right in between Survivor Series and WrestleMania, do it. Because then it would allow you to reestablish and rehab WrestleMania, Royal Rumble, or specifically Royal Rumble, Survivor Series, and SummerSlam, because you're focused on those pay-per-views. Oh, but what about the big money? What about the big money? How much money are you making if the pay-per-views are on the network? I guarantee you, people don't have network subscriptions just for the pay-per-views. Especially at this point, I don't think most people even care about the pay-per-views as far as the network's concerned. They care about the original content and NXT. That's what I guarantee you, if you did a market, research, that a higher percentage of people watch the network for NXT, whether it's UK or America, takeovers, stuff like that, and then the original content, like, Edge and Christian's show and Bruce Pritchard's show and all that stuff, and then step down would be the old tape libraries. WWE, WCW, ECW, UWF, all that stuff. AWA, all that stuff. And then the last one would be current content. Pay-per-views, Raw and SmackDown, etc. It's just because more of the fan base, like especially with our age, knows they can do better because they've seen them do better. And has gotten to the breaking point of where, well, if you're not going to do better, I'm not going to watch. You know, and I've gotten to the point where if I hear praise about a match, I'm going to start watching the match, like Samoa Joe and Ricochet, which I haven't gotten to watch yet, but I will. But it's like, if that's the only good part of it, 3-hour show, what the hell's the point? You know, SmackDown, it's a little bit more manageable because it's 2 hours, but at the same time, it's easier to... I feel like it would be easier to keep a fan interested for a 2-hour show than a 3-hour show, but in my opinion, you know, just go back to the formula that they used to have back in the day of, not, you know, Vince Russo's formula, but the formula of do something at the beginning of the show that pays off at the end of the show. Or do something at the beginning of the show and that the end of the show adds to it to make you want to come back and watch next week. And then the payoff happens at the pay-per-view. That used to be the formula. That used to be the formula where you watch, you start the show, they do something, they have a hot start, the middle of it adds to it, the end of it pays it off, or continues it and makes you want to watch it next week. I mean, do I disagree with the fact that maybe the formula went away once WWE lost their competition? No. But is that a legitimate reason why that formula should have went away? No. Because what happened to if it ain't broke, don't fix it? You know, and I apologize to those who may be tired of hearing us complain about WWE, but maybe shifting gears a little bit to talking about more of a positive idea of, I started doing a series, quote unquote, on the site of ideas of what I think could help WWE. And that is, I said, well, they're never going to unify the world titles because they're gonna, you know, they would be like, oh, we're gonna be losing money, you know, house shows, because, you know, SmackDown's guys still go on their own house shows, I'm pretty sure, and Raw's guys still go on their house shows, so they have 2 world champions to attract people to the shows. Even though they could just as easily have one world champion go with one house show one week and then the other, you know, and then the other house show the next week, but that's just my opinion. So I said, why not unify the mid-card titles? Unify the Intercontinental in the United States, and then you could play up the history of both titles to sell the feud. And because you have the wild card stipulation, both guys can shift back and forth from each brand. And the other part was what I just said about having angles that start on the beginning of the show and pay off by the end, or continue through the following week. Like, if you pick out something that you think would help, like not, you know, shrinking down Raw, or, you know, replacing Vince McMahon, or something, you know, just something like realistic that you think could help WWE, even in the future, what would you say?
I don't know. They need a lot of...
You're not wrong. Well, then shift over to something that Lance Storm actually said, that I saw him say on Twitter, that he said, unify the titles, all the titles, cut down where you only have both tag team titles, both the women's and the single and the men's, one women's title, one mid-card title, one world title, and then you let the champions be the wild card people.
Makes sense to me.
To where you actually have a reason why they're jumping back and forth between the brands, as opposed to just having random people show up on the show every week. Even though it's not really random, with the fact that I'm pretty sure if you had to look back, Roman Reigns probably has been on Raw a lot more than Andrade, or Finn Balor, or people like that. And Shane McMahon probably has too. Just like Seth Rollins or somebody like that has probably been on SmackDown a lot more than Samoa Joe. I don't know. I mean, I know it's not good that I don't know the difference between people. Baron Corbin. Let's put Baron Corbin. So I'm not picking a champion. But I do agree that it would make a lot more sense than the way they do it now, and that's the problem. That's what they should have did to begin with. But I'm also the one that said from the start, you have one world title, two mid-card titles, one tag team title, one women's title. This is before the tag team titles, the women's tag team titles. I think they would have been better off without the 24/7 title, because you put the women's title on one show and the cruiserweight title on the other, so it's like the original brand split where one show has the women's division and one show has the cruiserweight division. You don't have 205 Live, or if you do, you say that the cruiserweights only appear on 205 Live, and then once you want to move them up, you move them up to Raw or SmackDown like they've been doing with Buddy and Cedric Alexander, and Mustafa Ali and all those people, that it would make it seem like where 205 Live is more like ECW, where it's just like a training ground for the cruiserweights, as opposed to just to keep them fresh and on people's minds, as opposed to just a show that nobody cares about. But then that would make it where, okay, the 24/7 title may make a little bit more sense because the cruiserweight title's on 205 Live, so just put the 24/7 title on whatever show that the women's title isn't on. That would make a little bit more sense, but it would also elevate the Intercontinental title and the United States title, because you wouldn't have two world titles, and it would make it seem more like the United States and Intercontinental are more like those titles. More like a world title as opposed to a mid-card title.
Yeah.
Yes, in that case, Kofi probably would never have won the title, or it would have been less likely because he wouldn't have had there wouldn't have been a Universal Champion. So he would have had a lot more competition with Seth and Roman and other people than just being able to fight Daniel Bryan. Brock would have been meshed in there too, and it's like, people would have been more pissed off because people would have been like, oh, well, Kofi should have beaten Brock, or something like that, and it's like, okay, that's where, having two world titles could make sense, but who's the better champion, and how is it possible that you can have two world champions? But that's just WWE's cash grab attempt of, like I said, with the pay-per-views and because the original plan of the brand split was separate pay-per-views and separate house shows and everything, but now it's just like, I kind of agree with Lance that having the champions be the wild card would make more sense. The only one, though, just to jump in, that wouldn't make sense is saying that the Iconics would have to be wild cards, because I'm pretty sure they said it from the start that the tag team titles would be on both brands, not just one. So technically that means the champion should be able to jump between brands without being counted as a wild card person. I mean, do they? I don't know, because that would actually require them to defend the titles. That's the problem with WWE and how they booked Sasha Banks, that with the fact that they lost Sasha Banks, they lost a tag team. Yes, Bayley's in a better position now than she was when she was with Sasha, But the tag team division isn't. Because in the span of about a month, you lose Sasha Banks and Nia Jax, you lose 2 tag teams. So I don't know. I mean, there was a point when I would say that the tag team division made a little bit of sense because it would get more people on television. But with the fact that basically now you have 3 heel teams and 1 face team, and also the question of Alexa Bliss being able to compete, but with her association with Nikki Cross, you would call them a tag team, Sonya and Mandy and the Iconics. Other than that, the only other team is Kairi Sane and Asuka, and they're the only babyface tag team. In my opinion, why are they the only babyface tag team but not the ones holding the belts? Because if you have the only babyface team holding the belts, have them held the titles and all the heels go against them. Or you don't have the titles. Because we don't have the depth to have the titles, or if you're not having the people go down to NXT and compete against the women in NXT too, then what's the point? Because having, Jessamine Duke and her partner fight for the tag team titles would make sense, because they're an actual tag team. Then you would have them holding the tag team titles, Shayna Baszler as women's champion, and then eventually Ronda could come back and win the women's title. So they would have gold all over WWE. Which is what I thought they should do to begin with. But I thought it would be more with, once Shayna and the other 2 got promoted, that they would have gold all over anyway and just run WWE. And that would lead to a unification match with Shayna and Ronda, 1 champion. But apparently, if anything, the triple threat match at WrestleMania was a perfect time to do that, and they didn't do it. Go figure why. Well, what do you think of the rant I just went on?
No,
I mean, it's just like, then you see, like, what was I going to say? It's hard to believe in the titles when the champion makes the title and not the... I mean, when the champion makes the title, not the title makes the champion. Because the title's supposed to carry some sort of a reputation with it when somebody wins it. It's not supposed to be based on the person who won it. The title's supposed to be able to elevate somebody to a new level. And the WWE titles haven't been able to do that for years. And that's a problem. And that's one of the things that WWE, for whatever reason, doesn't want to address or try and fix, and it makes you question why bother having titles then. Before we wrap things up, I know we've done this in the past, but if you had to pick ahead of SummerSlam, 2 months out of SummerSlam, a perfect time to start building a feud, what match, I'm not saying what match would make you want to watch SummerSlam, because I know that would be a tall order, but what match would actually at least make you pay attention to where you would actually want to know the result of the match and if it was a good match? Like, what match would have to be at SummerSlam for that to happen?
No. I'm still waiting for that to win the Universal or that WWE Championship, so if he was involved versus Seth Rollins or Kofi Kingston, I would watch that.
I had a feeling Finn Balor would be your choice.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with that, and I think he put up a better fight than Braun Strowman did against Brock Lesnar. So that should be, something that's kept in mind, because, if you get a good match out of Brock Lesnar, then that should be something that's rewarded. I agree with that, and I'll, second that notion. Just as long as Shane McMahon's not the one challenging for the title, I'll be happy. But what about Bray Wyatt? Because
I have no interest in Bray Wyatt.
Even with his new interesting funhouse?
Nope, I have no interest.
Wow. WWE ruined it for you, huh?
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. I mean, he's done well with it, in my opinion. It's just a matter of well, that's the thing. It's like I said with Lars, that if Lars beats Cena, what would they do next? He's done well so far, Bray, since he has returned, but what are they going to do next? I'm happy that Bray's succeeding, but all Bray is succeeding at is talking. Everybody's known since he's debuted, he's been a skilled talker. But until they actually have him on camera and in the ring and having a direction other than just having his funhouse every week, what exactly is he going to do next? And that's the question of, is this going to be a serious rebirth of Bray Wyatt to where they're actually going to give him a shot on top? Or is it just going to be like his past, where he's going to have a lot of momentum, and then it's just all going to be sucked out like a balloon? And if it is, then it's kind of like, why waste the time then if you're just going to not go anywhere with it? But that's just WWE. Now, is that the reason why you have no emphasis on Bray? Because you've gotten invested in him before, and they just didn't go anywhere with him? So
I've just never been interested in Bray Wyatt. I don't see any. I mean, it's Husky Harris. Like, I don't see anything in him that's fascinating, personally.
So it was more how they brought him up that took you out from the start.
Yeah. I've never, from the beginning, I never was interested.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's, why people say, first impressions matter. Yeah. I know, that, I know that. Okay. I know that at this point, people have grown accustomed to updates on the book, and I will give an update on the book as we wrap up here. It's final edits. There's just, a lot of lacking depth in some cases, and just, proper grammar, and final edits that I may have glossed over when I looked over the book, that now that I'm going over it with a fine-tooth comb, it's stuff that I'm catching and other people have been catching and correcting. As far as where that's at, I would say 3 weeks. I would say it's more accurate to not put a timetable on it, but just to say that more than likely the book will be published before the end of the summer. And the best way to put it is that more promotional material will come out as I get closer to finishing the final edits, and that's when people like yourself will end up with the book. because I don't see a point in having people review the book if it's not perfect. Or at least elaborated on, because, well, just to give it some context of in the video, and maybe involve you too. Would you agree that sometimes when you're writing about wrestling, you write about wrestling from a perspective of somebody who knows what you're talking about for people who also know what you're talking about, and you don't have a tendency to elaborate on it because you don't feel like you need to, because somebody else knows what you're talking about? Like you're not writing about it for a non-wrestling fan.
Yeah, no, definitely, like, I'm assuming if you're reading it that you know what I'm talking about.
And that's exactly what I did for the book. The problem is, I'm not talking about modern stuff, I'm talking about stuff that happened 18 years ago, and it's hard for, like, I didn't realize when I was writing it, in some cases, that I should have elaborated a little more on what I was writing, because of the possibility that people aren't going to remember, or the possibility that people may remember but want more depth to really remember and get an accurate picture of what's going on. And it's just stuff that didn't necessarily cross my mind because of what I'm used to writing about. Like, I'm used to writing for people who know what I'm talking about and not really needing to elaborate, because if I say, Vince Russo, people are going to know Vince Russo, but a person who hasn't watched in 18 years may not remember Vince Russo. Or somebody who never watched WCW, who is interested in it because of, oh, it's a wrestling book. They may need more depth than somebody who has watched WCW and remembers it. And I didn't think about that at the time, but going through it again and having it pointed out to me by other people who know but don't remember, it made me add more depth. I mean, is that going to change how I write about on the site? Probably not, because it's easier to expect people to know what you're talking about when you're talking about more modern stuff. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Especially, somebody like your case where you didn't watch WCW, so you would need a little bit, or you would want a little bit more depth to get a better understanding of what's going on. That's correct too, right?
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. But yeah, either way, right now, probably by the end of the summer, or more than likely by the end of the summer. I mean, I'm not, dogging it as far as doing the edits. It's just that there's a lot of edits to do. There's a lot of pages in the book, let's put it that way. And it's not like it's going to take a day and a half to go through all the edits. It's going to take a while to go through all the edits, especially with the fact that life does get in the way of, actually having to work, having a job, stupid job getting in the way of me writing a book. No fun. But that does stop from, time that I could spend writing the book. I mean, fixing the book, but by the end of the summer, it should be all set and all ready to go. And that's better off saying that because it gives me more time to do it. And not put it in my mind that I'm going to rush, because it's stupid to rush. Because, you want it to be good. But I also did find out that it does not take Amazon that long to publish the book, because they basically just review it, make sure it's good, and then they publish it. As far as, grammatical errors and errors in the context of the words, and if it passes that, then it gets published. So with that being said, by the end of the summer, the WCW book will happen, and then the next book that is actually written will be heading into the editing phase again, to ahead of being published probably at some point next year. So it's not like it's going to be one and done. It's going to be one and then the next one, for as far as books are concerned. But with that being said, and the cheap plug out of the way, I want to thank Sam again for joining us, or joining me, because it's not like I have people sitting next to me. But coming on and having another monthly discussion about WWE, and I hope that maybe next month it'll be a little bit more positive.
Maybe.
I doubt it, but let's be optimistic. And with that being said, let us know down in the comment section below if you agree, disagree about anything we said. I know that if people actually did comment, that I would find at least one WWE mark who is calling me negative and saying I should stop watching if I don't like it. Well, lo and behold, I don't watch it, so you can't really say that. Because anybody who says that what we're saying is not right is more or less one of those people that are causing the problem because they watch anyway. Not to bury fans, but if you're watching to complain, you shouldn't be watching. If you're saying it's good, yes, some of it might be, but most of it isn't. You can't expect change if you're not letting it change, because if you're still watching, then it's not going to change. But either way, with that little disclaimer out of the way, and the lack of expectation of any hate mail, you can also leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content just like this that you can only find right here at Wrestling Express. Till next time. Whenever that might be.